The Spanish colonization of the Americas began with a voyage that was not even intended to discover a new world. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, a Genoese navigator under the patronage of Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella, set sail westward in search of a new trade route to Asia. Instead, he stumbled upon the islands of the Caribbean, a vast and unknown land teeming with civilizations, flora, fauna, and resources the Europeans had never encountered. What began as exploration swiftly transformed into one of the most dramatic and devastating episodes of conquest in human history. Columbus's arrival marked the beginning of a centuries-long process of colonization, conquest, and cultural transformation. Upon his return to Spain with tales of gold, exotic lands, and seemingly docile natives, the Spanish crown quickly realized the magnitude of what had been discovered. They funded more voyages, each more ambitious than the last. The Caribbean islands, particularly Hispaniola and Cuba, became the first Spanish footholds. Natives were enslaved under the encomienda system, a brutal institution that cloaked forced labor under the guise of religious instruction and civilization. Entire island populations, such as the Taino, were decimated by disease, overwork, and violence within mere decades. But the Caribbean was just the beginning. Driven by rumors of immense wealth and powerful empires inland, conquistadors turned their gaze to the mainland. In 1519, Hernán Cortés set sail from Cuba to the Mexican coast with a small army. Against staggering odds and aided by alliances with native enemies of the Aztecs, superior weaponry, horses, and deadly European diseases like smallpox, Cortés was able to topple the mighty Aztec Empire. Tenochtitlan, the glittering capital built on a lake, was reduced to rubble. Its emperor, Moctezuma II, died under mysterious circumstances during the siege, and the Spanish erected Mexico City atop its ruins, declaring it the heart of New Spain. Farther south, another empire awaited. In the 1530s, Francisco Pizarro marched into the Andes in search of the fabled riches of the Inca. Timing was on his side. The Inca Empire was reeling from a brutal civil war and a smallpox epidemic introduced by earlier Spanish contact. Pizarro captured Emperor Atahualpa during a deceptive meeting and, after extracting a ransom in gold and silver that filled entire rooms, executed him anyway. The Inca resistance persisted in the highlands, but the empire was effectively broken, and Cusco, its capital, was soon under Spanish control. Gold and silver flowed from the Americas into Spanish coffers, especially from the mines of Potosí in modern-day Bolivia, turning Spain into the richest and most powerful empire in Europe. Yet this wealth came at an unbearable cost for indigenous people. Entire civilizations were destroyed, native populations collapsed by up to 90% within a century due to disease, forced labor, and war. The Spanish crown attempted reforms, including the laws of the Indies and efforts by religious figures like Bartolomé de las Casas to reduce indigenous abuse, but enforcement was uneven and exploitation continued. Catholic missionaries, particularly Jesuits and Franciscans, followed closely behind the conquistadors. They built missions, churches, and schools, seeking to convert indigenous peoples to Christianity and European ways of life. While some genuinely sought to protect native rights, their work also played a role in cultural erasure, dismantling traditional beliefs, languages, and practices. Over time, however, a new and complex cultural fusion emerged. Mestizo societies combining Spanish and indigenous traditions, creating the foundation of modern Latin America. Not all indigenous groups submitted easily. The Mapuche in southern Chile resisted Spanish rule for over 300 years. The Pueblo Revolt of 1680 in New Mexico expelled Spanish settlers for over a decade. The Maya, despite the fall of their city-states, retreated into the jungles and waged a guerrilla-style resistance that lasted for centuries. Yet, gradually, most of the Americas south of the present-day United States fell under Spanish dominion, carved into viceroyalties ruled by officials sent from Madrid. African slavery became another tragic pillar of the Spanish colonial system. As native populations declined and the demand for labor soared, millions of Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic to work in sugar plantations, mines, and haciendas. This created a racial caste system, castas, that stratified society based on a person's mixture of European, Indigenous, and African ancestry, with Spaniards born in Europe, peninsulares, at the top, and Indigenous and African peoples at the bottom.